to the science clip How to Use the Basilica. In this science clip I will explain what the Basilica are and how you can use them. This explanation is a brief compilation of my article using the Basilica in the Zeitschrift der Sammelier-Stiftung für Rechtsgeschichte, Romanistische Abteilung number 133. The Basilica are the main sources in Byzantine legal literature. They are a compilation of Greek texts comprising and concerning Justinian's legislation. It was created in the late 9th century. The complete and authoritative edition of the Basilica was published in Groningen in the Netherlands by Professor Scheltema, Professor van der Wal and Professor Holberda. If you work with the Basilica, it is important to distinguish between the different periods of Roman law. Our distinction in Roman law consists of classical law, Justinianic law, early Byzantine law and later Byzantine law. We have to do this because the same texts are reused again and again, each time in a different context. By doing so, differences in the meaning of the law become visible. Each period of Roman law has its own characteristics. In this science clip we will focus on early Byzantine law and later Byzantine law. Because both were based on Justinian's legislation, we must start with the timeline from Justinian. In 527, Justinian became Emperor of the Roman Empire. He resided in the east part, the Greek-speaking part of the empire, in Constantinople. When he came to power, a well-organized compilation of laws was lacking. Therefore, he gave Tribonian the order to make one. This happened with the promulgation in 533 and 534 of the Institutes, the Digest and the Code. These editions were written in Latin. The Institutes, an introduction to law, were based on the Institutes of the 2nd century jurist Gaius. The Digest contains a part of the classical Roman law which was preserved through excerpted juridical texts from the beginning of our era until the end of the 3rd century. Some texts were written, for example, by Papinian and Ulpian. The code consists of constitutions dating from the 2nd to the 6th century. These constitutions were issued, for example, by Emperors Diocletian and Constantine. The Institutes, the Digest and the Code comprise material of old law. This law is called classical law. By the way these old texts were incorporated into the Institutes, the Digest and the Code, their meaning was changed. They now formed Justinianic law. From 534 onwards, Justinian issued new constitutions, the novels. These novels were written in Greek. The Institutes and the Digest, together with the Code, constituted the material for the law education by the antecessors. These antecessors were professors who taught the codification of Justinian in the Byzantine Empire from 533 to 560. Their teachings were in Greek because the students were Greek-speaking. In this way, Byzantine law was born. Byzantine law started in the classroom with the transformation of Latin Roman law into Greek. In the following period, due to the lack of knowledge of Latin, these Greek comments and translations of the original Latin texts were used. Many different versions were in use. In the 9th century, during the reign of Basil I, a project started to reorganize the legislation of Justinian. It was during the reign of Leo VI, around 893, that the compilation of Greek texts concerning Justinian's legislation was completed. This compilation of Greek texts was called the Basilica. Teachings from the antecessors and excerpts of jurists of the early 7th century were added in the margins of the Basilica text, all, of course, in Greek. They were called Old Scholia. They were inserted from the middle of the 10th century onwards. In the 11th and 12th century, remarks on the Basilica text itself appeared. These remarks are called New Scholia. Therefore, we can find in the margins of the manuscript of the Basilica both the Old Scholia and the New Scholia. The Byzantine law of the Basilica is later Byzantine law. But in the scholia we can distinguish early Byzantine law and later Byzantine law. The content of the old scholia contains early Byzantine law. These old scholia can be of great benefit to legal historians because these scholia were made in the period just after Justinian's codification was compiled. The new scholia contain later Byzantine law. These new scholia can be of great benefit for a comparative study of Roman law. Those two forms of Greek-Roman law, early Byzantine law and later Byzantine law, we always have to distinguish from classical law and Justinianic law. We return to the Basilica. In the Groningen edition, the Basilica text and the scholia are published separately. In the A volumes, we will find the Basilica text. In the B volumes, we will find the scholia. Let us start with the A volumes, the Basilica text. In the Basilica, Justinian's legislation was arranged into 60 books, subdivided into titles and capita. A title deals with one subject. For example, Book 28, Title 5 shows all the parts of Justinian's legislation in the order they were promulgated. Inst for institutes, D for digest, C for code and Nov for novels. How can we find the corresponding fragments in Justinian's legislation and the Basilica? If we have the Basilica fragment, we see at once the corresponding fragment in Justinian's legislation in the A series. If we have a digest fragment, we can find the corresponding Basilica fragment in using the pages at the end of volume B9. But you can also use the edition of the Corpus Juris of Mommsen-Krüger. In a footnote to the rubric of a title you will find the corresponding Basilica fragment. In part B we find the Old Scholia from the early Byzantine law period and New Scholia from the later Byzantine law period. How can we identify scholia as Old Scholia or New Scholia? Let us start with an Old Scholion indicated by the following reference. This scholion is scholion number 13 from manuscript PA at Basilica book 23.1.19, corresponding with digest book 12.1.19. This Basilica scholion is placed at page 1544 at lines 3 to 19. It stems from Stephanus. I will discuss here 4 characteristics. Firstly, the headings of Old Scholia. The Old Scholia are often easy to identify because the name of the person who made the remark is mentioned at the beginning of the remark. This scholion stems from Stephanus. Other jurists in the headings of Old Scholia are, for example, Thalelius or Theodorus. The second characteristic is the use of the reference. In the Old Scholia, the jurist refers to books by Bib, Biblion, Tit, title, Titlos, and to a digest fragment by Dic, Digeston. To identify these shortenings, we use the explanation in volume B1. The third characteristic is the allusion to the partes. These references appear only in the teachings of the antecessors. Justinian divided the 50 books of the digest into parts in accordance to the structure of the curriculum from before 533. In volume B2 we can find the division of the digest books into parts. We see here, for example, the partes Prota, De Judiciis and De Rebus. In the scholion we find the following reference. Monobiblion De Sponsalibus corresponds with digest book 23. To identify the number we use the explanation in volume B1. Gamma means 3. Pi alpha means 81. Stephanus refers to book 23, title 3, fragment 81. The fourth characteristic of the Old Scholion is the use of Latin technical terms and other Latin terms, corresponding with Justinian's codification. In the Scholion of Stephanus we find the words pupilles, condicticion, de sponsalibus, all Latin technical terms. We also find jurist mentioned, Paul Papinian. This was about the Old Scholia. Now let us have a look at the New Scholia. This scolion is scolion number 10, from manuscript PE at Basilica book 61-9, corresponding with digest book 369. This Basilica scolion is placed at page 3054 at line 31 to page 3055 line 2. The scolion stems from Hagio Theodoritus. I will discuss here two characteristics. Firstly, the headings of new scholia. Just like the old scholia, we can recognize the new scholia by the name of the person at the beginning of the remark. This scolion stems from Hagio Theodoritus. Other jurists in the headings of new scholia are, for example, Nomophilox or Nikaios. The second characteristic is the use of reference. The references to the books and titles are the same as in the old scholia. Bib, biblion, tit, titlos. But it is different with the references to the fragments. In the new scholia, the jurist refers to the fragment in the Basilica by Kev, which is the shortening of Kephalion, chapter. We can now distinguish the old scholia from the new scholia. But as for a specific word in the Basilica text, how can we find the corresponding scolion? In the A series, under the printed Basilica text, are entries of scholia, presenting the line number, the Greek word and the number of the scolion. Let us have a look at page 737 in volume A2. In this example, we find at B14121 corresponding with digest 17121 in the entry of scholia in line number 14 the word agoreses. It corresponds with the word in line 14. In the entry, the word agoreses is followed by CA2. This means a scolion in manuscript CA with number 2 is placed at this word, as we find in volume B2 at page 703, lines 13 to 24. I've come to the end of this science clip. For a more complete description you can read my article Using the Basilica in the Zeitschrift der Savigny-Stiftung für Rechtsgeschichte. In this article you will find more details about how to use the Basilica.